Hello and welcome to the second panel session here at the Making Decarbonisation Fair conference. My name is Rob Marchand. I am chairing the session and I am one of the trustees at the Fuel Poverty Research Network, as well as a lecturer in resource efficiency at Sheffield University Management School. And before I get into much more of my introduction, I'm going to make a preemptive apology. I am living the retrofit dream as we speak and have builders all throughout my house. I've managed to get them stopping the loudest noises, but unfortunately you may hear drills and banging in the background. Please bear with me. If it does get bad, I will mute my microphone as if on cue. They've just started again. But as I look out my window, I can see piles of insulation and kingspan. So you can't say I don't practice what I preach. So I would like to welcome everyone to this session, whether you are watching at 11:30 a.m. in the UK or Portugal, maybe you're having a working lunch somewhere in Central Europe, or you're staying up late to find out all about energy poverty across the world, as one of our panelists is. Caroline, I must say, I am very impressed with your dedication, staying up till 10:30 at night to give a presentation at a conference. I'm fairly sure at most conferences, the discussion would have found its way to a bar by that time. So congratulations on staying so late. It has been a really exciting conference so far. In just over 24 hours, I found my personal understanding of this field has grown immeasurably. I was commenting to one of the co-organizers from the organization DECO yesterday about how 6 years ago, when I was writing up my PhD thesis, I was looking for research on energy poverty from Portugal and could only find one paper that was written by someone who was actually living in the UK. Then I went to a conference in America, which spawned the Fuel Poverty Research Network, when I bumped into Amy, who you met yesterday, who was the other Brit at the conference. And we were the only ones who seemed to care about energy poverty, and it wasn't even being talked about in America. Now we are here 6 years later with over 400 people attending this conference, presenting perspectives on the issue from around the world. It is incredibly exciting and empowering to see this issue being recognized and amplified by researchers, practitioners, and policymakers from across the planet. So that is the focus of this session. Yesterday, we examined energy poverty and decarbonisation in our host nation of Portugal. Their Secretary of State actually noticed and notified us that the tackling energy poverty is central to delivering decarbonisation, and it's great to hear the policymakers listening. This morning, we broadened our geographical reach to the EU, and this afternoon's session, we are going to hear perspectives and ideas from researchers from Australia, from Brazil, from Chile, from Finland, from Italy, Romania, and Spain. So a really diverse panel. We want this to be a two-way discussion though. My colleague Traves is online and moderating the chat on Hoover, and he will be highlighting questions to our panel throughout the session. So please ask your questions on the Q&A panel in Hoover, vote up the questions that you think are most important, and we will put them to our specialists. If you like what you hear or want to continue the debate after the session, remember there is the community space on Hoover, and you can see all delegates' profile pages too, many of whom are on LinkedIn, so you can keep the networking and discussion going long after the panel ends. So speakers, I really want to encourage this discussion and debate, so let me publicly remind you that you have 3 minutes max to recap the key points from your video. I will step in at 3 minutes. You have been warned. People at other conferences will stand by the fact that I do have no shame in saying, right, time's up. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our speakers for this session. First up, we will have Alejandra Cortez from the University of Chile, and she's going to be talking about the background to energy poverty in South Chile. Then we'll have Ana Barajome, and I apologize for all of my pronunciations here, from Politecnico di Milano, who asks, will plans go up in smoke? Third speaker will be Carmen Sanchez Guevara from UPM, who asks about the role of public space in the democratization of decarbonisation. Followed by Caroline Porto-Valente from the University of Technology in Sydney, who has been researching energy poverty among older, low-income Australians. Our fifth speaker is George Giglau from Babes Bolyar University in Romania, who has researched the links between poverty, energy poverty, and vulnerability. Our penultimate speaker is Raul Costano Rosa, who will introduce the Finnish Energy Observatory for us. And finally, rounding out the panel is Teresa Credo from IET-CSIC, reflecting on the use patterns and energy consumption in Spanish homes during the pandemic lockdown. So there we go, 7 panelists. It's going to be a busy session, plenty of ideas. I did a quick look at the backgrounds of our speakers. 4 of the 7 have a background in architecture. We have some civil engineers and a political scientist. So it's going to be a very diverse set of opinions and views. So without further ado, let's get into the talks, and let me hand over to Alejandra, who is a PhD candidate at the School of Global, Urban and Social Studies at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. Her research has been focused on energy efficiency, indoor environmental quality, energy poverty and sustainability. And she is a lecturer at the Universidad de Chile on these topics. She is also part of the Energy Poverty Network coordination team developed in Chile. I'm really looking forward to Alejandra's talk, and I will be following up with her afterwards on the Energy Poverty Network and how we could work together at the FPRN as well. So over to Alejandra, who will be talking about the background to energy poverty in Chile.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for your introduction. Well, I'm an architect, a part of the group of architects here in this panel, and I'm from Chile. And I'm currently undertaking my PhD studies at the RMIT University in Australia. And now in March, I'm completing my first year of studies. So the presentation for this conference is about the background of energy poverty in South Chile. And my research will be conducted in a city that is called Coyhaique, that was reported in 2018 as the most polluted city from particulate matter in Latin America. And the main source of emission is the domestic firewood, which is used for heating and cooking. So this intensive use of firewood is due to its cheap price compared to other fuels. Chile has very high energy prices. Also, the lack of housing energy efficiency, especially in social housing, which is the focus of my research. But also there are some cultural aspects that are linked to the firewood use. So in this context, 2 subsidies have been implemented in the city, one for thermal retrofit and the other one to replace all heating appliances. According to the available data that we have in Chile, it's possible to state that most of social housing that have not yet done thermal retrofits are probably always under an energy poverty condition, as they are economically vulnerable, living in social housing that lacks energy efficiency, and living in a country with high energy prices if we compare them with our minimum income. So my research adopted a qualitative approach. I will use interviews to identify how households have changed their cultural patterns of energy use after or during these energy efficiency interventions. And I'm particularly interested in understanding their lived experience with the implementation process of these programs, whether they notice benefits or difficulties after the alterations done on their home, and how these changes can enable shifts in their energy use habits, for example, and also on their retrofit know-how. So to summarize, I want to explore this dynamic interaction between energy efficiency interventions and the changes in energy culture, and how these material changes may trigger or limit household capability to overcome energy poverty. So I'm starting my data collection now in a couple of months, hopefully. And so end of this year, I should have the first analysis of the results of the interviews. So that's my research. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Alejandra. Certainly sounds like a very interesting piece of research, something that I can relate to, and quite similar, something that I did in the UK. So I'll definitely be having a conversation with you afterwards. But so there's our first perspective on our first panelist, and a great analysis of an area of the world that I don't know very much about, and seeing the often missed opportunity to understand the cultural implications of how we utilize energy and how that may actually hamper or impact upon the effectiveness of different policies, something that I think will be touched on by some of our other speakers as well. So let's turn our attention to our next speaker then. We'll be handing over here to Anna, who is a PhD candidate at the Polytechnic University of Milan in urban planning, design and policy. Her research aims to understand how energy transition related policies affect the situation of energy poor households in terms of heating, with a focus on Eastern member states of the EU, especially Hungary. Her talk is entitled, Will Plans Go Up in Smoke? So Anna, it's over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. In the video that I produced for this conference, I presented a paper that I wrote in the frame of my PhD, which is analyzing the Hungarian energy poverty-related chapters of the National Energy and Climate Plan, which is like a major policy tool to coordinate the national energy transition for the next decade. And so first in my paper, I identified some key factors of energy poverty in Hungary. Basically, I highlighted that incomes are relatively low compared to other EU countries, and inequalities are increasing due to government policies. There is a high share of use of solid fuels, especially biomass, among the lowest income groups. It reaches almost 50%. And there is also an important problem of the building quality, especially related to energy efficiency. And I highlighted that households that are depending on solid fuels are often using outdated individual solid fuel heaters that are causing important air pollution. And then in the second part of my presentation, I analyzed the two chapters of the National Energy and Climate Plan. And I wanted to understand how far it is responding to the requirements coming from the European Commission and how far it is responding to the key determining factors of energy poverty in Hungary. And the outcome of the analysis was that the NECP, first of all, fails to comply with the first requirement of the European Commission to setting an energy poverty reduction related target and to dedicate a time frame for that. And the analysis also highlighted that the policies outlined in this strategy are quite superficial and they are not really responding systematically to energy poverty related issues. And especially there is a lack of building retrofit programs and there is a lack of recognition of solid fuel heating related difficulties of energy poor households. And there are also a lack of guarantees that will secure the implementation of the outlined policies. So my conclusions were including some recommendations in order to ameliorate the specific chapters of the National Energy and Climate Plan in order to secure that energy transition provide benefits for energy poor households as well. And that's shortly the sum up of the paper that I presented.
Thank you, Anna. Absolutely bang on 3 minutes. So congratulations for that. Really interesting insight. Again, another country that I have only visited once. And so it was really interesting to hear the perspectives and the challenges that with this sort of weak engagement, as Anna puts it, from the government, sort of almost, it seemed from the way I interpreted your presentation, at least, putting in a policy because someone told them that they had to, but not really engaging with it in a meaningful way. And as you put it in your conclusions, their current design risks energy poverty remaining, which is a real shame. And why we brought this conference here to try and look at ways that we can tackle and prevent the reoccurrence or the existence of energy poverty in any form as we move forward. So thank you very much for that talk, Anna. Right. So the third perspective we have in this session comes from Carmen Sanchez Guevara, who holds a PhD in architecture from the Universidad de Politécnica de Madrid. She has drafted the technical study of energy poverty for the City Council of Madrid, and has also conducted a report for Gas Natural Fenosa Foundation on solutions for vulnerable households, applying the methodology developed in her doctoral research. Carmen is currently assistant professor at Universidad Politécnica de Madrid, and her talk will ask about the role of public space in the democratization of decarbonisation. So Carmen, it's over to you for your opinions.
Thank you very much, Rob. Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, this morning. It depends on where you are. What I'm presenting today is, as Rob said, the role of the public space in the democratization of decarbonisation. We've been working for some time on summer energy poverty, which is something that maybe some southern countries from the global north are starting to be concerned about. And what we're dealing with right now is that how we're going to help energy poor households in the Mediterranean area who suffer from extreme events in summer, from heat waves, as generally what we've been doing in the field of retrofitting in cases of energy poor households. It's that we've been isolating these households as if they were some sort of thermos as the coffee thermos, but this is not enough for summer conditions, and we need to incorporate some other strategies. And this is where the public space starts to have a key role, as we need to incorporate climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies in the public space in order to cool down temperatures, especially in these big cities affected with huge urban heat islands. And once we make that, we will democratize these cool temperatures in neighborhoods, and we will help these energy poor households to achieve better temperatures during summer. This is why we think the public space is a key for that, and this is something that has not been incorporated, I think, in the energy poor discourse, I think. And we've been focusing so much in the households, in the envelopes, in housing, but what about the public space? And in certain countries, this is a key to cool down and cope with overheating problems in energy poor households. And that's all. Rob.
Perfect.
What a wonderful to time.
What a wonderful panel. You had 30 seconds more. You could have had something else to say, but we'll have the questions asked, so it doesn't matter.
Let's leave it for some questions.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be plenty coming our way in a little minute. So thank you for that, Carmen. And yeah, I love the idea of democratization of public space for energy challenges. As much as it's the same problem I find with this, we always look at the household level and we lose the idea of the bigger system. So it's a very very novel idea, and I'd love to hear more about that. So whilst the sounds rumble on in the background, I will try and quickly introduce our next speaker. So following on from Carmen, we have Caroline Porto-Valente, who is a civil engineer from Brazil with 10 years of practical experience in the construction industry. She is currently studying for her doctorate at the University of Technology, Sydney, and she has researched energy poverty among older, low-income Australians as a key contemporary issue related to the poor energy efficiency of the existing residential building stock, which is very likely to intensify in the coming decades of climate change. So Caroline, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rob. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here with this amazing panel. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Well, I'm on the third year of my PhD research. And at the moment, I'm just writing up some preliminary results and working on writing up the thesis as well. So in my PhD research, I aimed at investigating and exploring the causes, the extent, the impacts, and why not some potential solutions to alleviate energy poverty among older low-income Australians. And I adopted a mixed method approach with some quantitative analysis of the Australian housing conditions data set, and also a qualitative approach with semi-structured in-depth interviews with older Australians, mainly in Sydney, but also some from Melbourne as well. I had 22 semi-structured interviews, and the video I submitted is all about the preliminary findings on these interviews. So as you could see from the video, I talked about the causes of energy poverty among older low-income Australians. And besides, of course, the poor energy efficiency of the home, the low income, because most of them are solely or primarily dependent on the age pension, and the high energy prices that we have here in the liberalized market. Some other causes related to this particular vulnerable group were related to social exclusion, some computer illiteracy, which prevented them to engage online with the energy market as well and being able to shop around. The lack of energy literacy itself. So many of them, like when I would talk to them, they would say, oh, I think that I don't mind, I don't have the energy to go in and shop around, or I don't know what to do. I don't know where to seek help. I don't know, I have no idea if I can apply for a payment plan or not. So there's a lot of awareness effort that we need to tackle with this vulnerable group. And also lack of suitable deals, because we know that here in the Australian market, even one of the interviews called this as a confusopoly, because it's almost like they aimed at making everyone confused. But there's a lack of suitable deals for this particular vulnerable group, which is something that we need to address maybe in a more proactive and active way from the energy market. I also addressed some impacts related to social isolation as well, and compromising essential and non-essential items. And lastly, I talked about some of the COVID-19 effects on having to spend more time at home, not being able to go to public spaces, as Carmen mentioned, and what can be done in related to all these issues. Maybe some stopping the confusopoly, making the energy market be more proactive to this group, some energy literacy training as the assist model that Marina Varsasi commented, and also reframing the kind of assistance that we can provide to these vulnerable groups, as they have a lot of stigma and ashamed or seeking for help. So I guess that's it in summary. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Caroline. Yeah, it's something I could definitely relate to. In my various pieces of work, I've spoken to plenty of older generation people here in the UK, and it seems there are a lot of similarities between the issues you found. But I really enjoyed your phrase, the confusopoly. I think I might be borrowing that one. You'll have to write a paper so I can reference you in it.
All right.
Yeah. That was a really good terminology, and it pretty much sums up how our energy suppliers here in the UK seem to work as well. So that was quite intriguing. So thank you very much for your talk, Caroline. And now over to our fifth speaker. George is a lecturer in political science at Babas-Bolyai University, and I apologize for that pronunciation, in Romania. He has a background in comparative politics, and today he's here to talk about his research, which is looking at the links between poverty, energy poverty, and vulnerability. So let me hand over to George, who can tell us all about this topic.
Thank you, Rob. It's a pleasure to greet you all here in Lisbon. I have to say from the onset that this is a presentation that I actually share with the next speaker, with another presentation, but this is a paper that we are working on together. So what we are trying to do is not, but rather to propose an approach that would be useful both at a conceptual level and also at an empirical level. So on the conceptual side of things, our starting point was the fact that when reading about energy poverty and energy vulnerability, although in the literature there is a growing understanding of the fact that the two are obviously not the same, when it comes to transposing these concepts into policies, there's very often confusion, let's say, between the two. So they're very often used interchangeably. And the best example I can think of is my own country. So the Romanian legal framework targeting energy poverty heavily relies, in fact, on the idea of vulnerability and less on energy, on the idea of poverty itself. So they're simply used as synonyms, to put it briefly. So what we are trying to do is to disentangle these two concepts, not only from a conceptual perspective, but also to suggest some empirical tools that would allow for better identification of who is energy poor as a state in itself at the level of a household, and who is in a state of vulnerability, which is perceived in the literature already as a more fluid state in which households can enter or exit depending on certain factors. And in doing so, we are also aiming to make use of literature on poverty and vulnerability, so without the energy label attached to them, because we find that theory, development, and vulnerability do not mind this entire body of literature at all. So there's basically no communication between the two bodies of literature, although again, also from a conceptual an empirical perspective as well, the program can quantify energy poverty. And in doing so, we try to develop 5 types of vulnerability that involves energy in order to move away a little bit from the idea of energy vulnerability, because this term actually encompasses different things, which also causes or contributes to that confusion that we were speaking about. So identifying not only energy poverty, but the specific type of energy vulnerability would actually help policies all together. And finally, this approach that we suggest involves or relies heavily on data and data coming from various stakeholders. And this is another key point of successfully researching, identifying energy poverty, energy vulnerability, and ultimately successfully addressing these empirically. So data coming and cooperation coming from various stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. I think, unfortunately, I might have missed some of what you were saying then, because it seems like your connection was freezing a little bit. But from what I was hearing and judging by your presentation, we were having a really interesting discussion about the problems with defining and understanding energy poverty and the sort of interrelation of different terminology with energy vulnerability, which is a debate that is is starting to become more and more common in the academic literature. So it's really good to hear how this has been a challenge within the context with which you were researching as well, which sort of links to some of the discussion that some of our other panelists have had in their paper, looking at the problems of different metrics within their country and the differences we see with when people, when countries understandably borrow from metrics that have been applied elsewhere and find that they might not be so relevant in their particular nation context. So a very interesting debate. So our penultimate speaker for today's session is Raul Costano Rosa, who has a PhD in architecture and has helped to develop the Finnish Energy Observatory, which is another network of experts, but in this case, they aim to address Finland's most pressing energy challenges related to climate change and a just transition towards a carbon neutral society. So Raul is going to introduce us to the Finnish Energy Observatory, and I'm going to hand over to Raul now. Raul, you're just on mute.
Sorry. Thank you. And to start now with the presentation of this project, this is a new project with only a few months of life. I'm leading this project with other colleagues in Tampere University, Sophie Pesmaker, from Birmingham University, Harriet Thompson and Carla Ricardet. And this project, the main idea is or the main activity is monitoring and disseminating relevant resources on key energy challenges in Finland. And then provide open space for discussion with experts from Nordic countries with other European, but not European countries. Those countries, those experts who has been working on those issues of energy poverty, energy inequality for a long time away. In this respect, I also would like now to highlight the first findings from our first policy brief, which is based on a nationally representative household survey in which we investigated Finnish people relationship with energy. So I would like to highlight from the result that around 28% of households have experienced some form of power cut. Over 25% were really cold during summer. Since October 2019, about 39% of young people have spent more time in public buildings to keep cool, social libraries, shopping mall. So this is a very important result looking at the futurism with climate change. Also, we investigated how the COVID-19 might have exacerbated these energy issues and others. And we found that around 8% of households reported using more energy than usual for this time of year. Around 8% of households worried that the energy supply might be affected. Some of them reported were experiencing more serious issues such as falling behind on at least one energy bill and owing money to the supply. So this kind of issue related with energy poverty in Finland, and it's quite important because currently there in Finland there is no energy poverty definition. This is not recognized in the public in the policy. So this is the idea. No, this network is trying to shed a light on this socialism. I think it's just on time, right, Rob?
Yeah, perfect. No problems at all there. Thank you very much, Raoul. So a great introduction to the Finnish Energy Poverty Observatory, but also highlighting some findings from a key survey. And I think it's really interesting to hear this question again about public space and how important public space has been to particularly vulnerable householders. And in your case, if I heard you correctly, particularly the young, for sort of escaping the challenges of energy poverty, whether that be heating or cooling. And it's a behavior we're starting to be able to sort of map to more and more countries. So that was a really useful insight. So for our last speaker in this panel session, I'm going to be handing over to Teresa Cuerdo, who completed her PhD at the University of Seville and currently works at Eduardo Torroja Institute for Construction Sciences. Her work has been related to the conditioning of internal spaces, energy saving and efficiency, and the environmental comfort of users. Her presentation will be reflecting on use patterns and energy consumption in Spanish homes during the pandemic lockdown. So Teresa, your time, the platform, is over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here sharing this panel with you. The short contribution that I present is part of a project where we collect information on what's supposed the public health measure of lockdowns, especially for Spanish households, and around the dwellings and the interaction between families and housing. This project is not initially focused on energy poverty per se, but the part linked to comfort perception and energy consumption patterns are, in fact, the broader one in the quantitative part, the questionnaires of this mix of method approach. The qualitative one collected photos and writing testimonies. So that also cover over other social and technical topics related to lockdown and housing. Aspects on energy use for daily and extraordinary tasks in the homes, separated by services, facilities, or appliances, comparing energy expenditures before and during the lockdown, availability of renewable energy systems, and adoption on energy saving measures are the most common ones. The main conclusions or ideas are referred to the extreme experience lived during the confinement, and that has supposed an unavoidable, obvious increase of energy consumption at home. And despite the increase of energy, people refer to be not in comfort in their homes for more than a third of them. So this could give us an idea of the quality of the current housing building stock, previous to specific regulations on energy saving, efficiency, and comfort in Spain. For the same reason, there were not renewable energy systems available for the great most of them. And strategies on energy saving to aware and empower people result in necessary according to the results obtained. About energy expenditure, it's remarkable that a quarter of household participants, almost a third during the confinement, reveals great expenditures on energy supplies, even when apparently we're not in energy vulnerable situations. We are currently working on recommendations and contributions to strategies, etc. So that's all I can say by now, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Teresa, bringing us right up to date, really, with some reflections there on the impact of COVID-19. Definitely a very relevant topic. Lots of debates hanging around there about who should sort of support that and impact should support and intervene on the impacts of heating and cooling energy costs. Certainly in my workplace, there's a big debate about whether our employer should be giving contributions to our heating costs, seeing as they're not having to heat their buildings any longer, but we're expected to work from home and all of a sudden are heating much more of the day. So it is interesting to hear how things have been happening over in Spain. So thank you very much, first of all, to all of our panelists, some fantastic perspectives and insights. There were 7 different talks, and that has already sparked a number of different questions that are coming up here in the chat. So I'm going to start with a question from Harriet Thompson, who has asked if she could hear some more about where the panelists draw their knowledge from. In other words, if you find you have to look to countries like the UK, Ireland, and Spain, and others who have been more dominant, if you like, in researching this topic for recent years. So does anyone want to raise their hand to take that question? Or shall I volunteer a speaker?
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Raoul, over to you.
Okay, thank you. So, for especially now from the Finland perspective, with this is now a very new concept now in Finland. We especially focus our main country. No, we are focused is in the UK. That no is the country has been living the energy poverty research during the last year, and also because we find similar situation in terms of issues in summer with problem to keep an adequate indoor environment during the summer. But also we bring now the expertise from Spain, the South Europe. Indeed, those are not our main country to refer, but obviously we are always open to other countries. And also I would like to highlight that Alexander has mentioned in Chile that the use of peak, no, to heat in winter. This is also an issue in Finland and related with the decarbonization transition. So indeed, we are looking at all those countries that are currently working on this issue of energy poverty, energy inequality, and just energy transition.
Hi, and I guess just to provide a bit of an idea of what goes on here in Australia, I would say that Victoria, the state of Victoria, is a very good benchmark for New South Wales, but they do experience the different spectrums of energy poverty. So I guess in Victoria, they do have some of the summer energy poverty, as Carmen mentioned, but also a lot of the winter energy poverty. But here in New South Wales, we do experience a lot more of the hot temperatures. So I guess what I've been looking for in terms of benchmarks and good examples, I would say the UK definitely for like the initial recommendations and the conceptualization of energy poverty, but countries like Spain and Greece and Portugal have also good examples in how can we tackle the extreme hot temperatures and how can we provide solutions for energy poverty in this context. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Raul and Caroline. So moving swiftly on, because the questions are coming thick and fast. Amy Ambrose has asked, in the UK, there is some evidence of public green spaces, which are key coping spaces for the energy poor, being effectively privatized or access is limited to reduce maintenance burdens. Energy poor households may be disadvantaged in terms of access to high quality green spaces in any case, and this is a further blow. Has this been observed anywhere else? I know it has been researched in Australia. So I'm going to ask Carmen first, because you particularly spoke about public spaces, but then if anyone else wants to come in, do join in after Carmen. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, for your question. First, I would like to clarify that when I speak about public space, of course, public space has a key role in providing outer comfortable spaces. But what I brought here today is how, through the intervention in public space, we can decrease indoor temperatures. So it's like going beyond that. In Spain, of course, we use a lot the public space. There are plenty of studies of how to use this public space during winter, during summer, how to provide comfortable outer spaces. And maybe linked to the possible privatization you're talking about. Here in Spain, here in Madrid, for example, we analyzed that highest incomes tend to live in the most comfortable areas, or which is the same, most vulnerable households tend to live in hottest areas of the city. And generally, these are neighborhoods with a quite degraded urban space. And that's why we think it's important taking action on these spaces. I've not heard anything about privatization of these spaces in Spain, at least I don't know them. But what it's true is that around best parks, highest incomes can be located. So at some point they have better access to these parks. And that's why when we take action in vulnerable neighborhoods, it's so important working on the public space. I don't know if that answers to your question, Amy, and thank you for that.
Does anyone else have any insight from other countries on this topic at all? No. Okay. Maybe that's a future research question for someone at this conference then. It does sound like a very pertinent question, and it's certainly something that has been weighing on my mind following my research a number of years ago. So our next question comes from John Rolat, and he asks, is there any transfer of traditional building techniques addressing passive cooling used in hot countries, such as the United Arab Emirates, being integrated into new developments or retrofit in Southern Europe? So one for possibly for our architect friends. He's asking particularly about Southern Europe here. So I suppose I'm drawn to Teresa or Carmen initially, but anyone else has an opinion, please feel free to answer the question. So over to you, Teresa first, maybe.
Okay. Well, I come from the southern of Spain, so I could share my own experience as user and then as an architect, because well, we share a part of these traditional methods or strategies or systems, construction systems, as part of the cultural heritage. So we have this information as a genetical one. So we are trying lots of studies and prototypes and projects are developed and updating these construction systems on the way to implement in novel projects or new ones. With the accomplishment of new regulations, but also with the knowledge of well, I could say materials, traditional materials, also given a new opportunity for this industry, such as I don't know how I could say in English, cal. You say how is cal, Carmen? I don't know. Calcium sulfate, okay, or something like that. No, it is gypsum, or oh my God,
it's lime.
Calcium carbonatum, I think. So well, it's a material. It's a white material that is painting all the villages in the south of Spain, and also it's good for maintaining bacteria and fungus, etc. Away from home. So well, it's just an example. There are lots of use and systems and cooling systems like evaporative cooling, for instance, that are traditional also in southern of Spain, and also included in new projects and updating by now.
If I can add something, Rob, as I came here to speak about public space, if you still didn't notice, yes, of course, this is part of our cultural heritage. We remember we had the Arabs in Spain till the 7th century. So yeah, it's some sort of in our ADN, as Teresa said. But just I would like to give attention that, for example, in Madrid, urban heat island, in some moments of the summer, it increases 8 degrees temperatures in the city center compared to the outskirts of the city. And a key strategy is the night ventilation. So if we impede this night ventilation with the huge urban heat island temperatures, this is like the basic, like the first strategy you can use in summer. And that's, I think this is the point in which public space can help in night ventilation, which seems to be basic, but nowadays, households from the city centers cannot enjoy this basic strategy.
Thanks very much for your answers. They're very insightful and hopefully answered John's question. I apologize for the hammering in the background. So I've got a question for George from, and I have to apologize for this pronunciation, Simj Gune, who asks, considering that energy poverty and income poverty are two different concepts, how can we interrelate income poverty and energy/fuel poverty so as to understand the role of income poverty on energy/fuel poverty? Over to you, George.
Yes, thank you for the question. In the meantime, there is some drilling happening here in my building as well. I don't know where that's coming from, or it might be just the same people in your apartment, Rob, that, you know, the sound ends up here somewhere. So thank you for the question. Now, I wouldn't say that income poverty and energy poverty are not integrated. I would say to some extent they are integrated too much, in the sense that many of the policy approaches or the principle lying at the core of policies approaching or addressing energy poverty focuses too much on income. So I think the struggle, the challenge is now for us to convince policymakers that it's actually more than income. It's about the quality of the buildings, it's about behavior and all the other things that we are all doing research on. However, indeed, how can we put these two together in a way that makes sense and actually helps us identify these different states of energy poverty, energy vulnerability, poverty as such, or overall vulnerability? What we are trying to propose in this paper, which I hope at some point will be you'll be able to see in lengthier form that what you are getting from me now. So we are looking at overall net income of the household, and then we are looking at energy expenses. And our suggestion, so that we can put this into practice, is that if you take energy expenses out of the net income and the remainder falls below the poverty threshold, the traditional poverty threshold, then that indicates a state of vulnerability associated to energy. And here things get a little bit more complicated, and I would love to speak more about this, but I don't think we have time. But just one other nuance to this. We are looking at the basic energy needs of a household, so the necessary energy expenditures at the level of a household, and then we are looking at the actual energy expenditures in a household. So basically we are working in two scenarios: if there is underspending or overspending. Okay, so that would tell us if just covering the basic energy needs, if that in itself would take the household relative to the net income below the poverty threshold. So that's one situation. And another one is if the actual energy expenses are higher than what is necessary. So if that takes you below the threshold, then that points to another kind of issue, which probably relates more to behavior inside the household. So this is where things get a little bit more complicated. And again, if I can clarify this maybe in a separate conversation, I'd love to do that. But again, the challenge is to not necessarily to integrate them, but to integrate them in a meaningful way. At first, to dissociate between the two, and then reintegrate them in a meaningful way. So in a way that places the problem of income itself where it's supposed to be when we are trying to paint the picture of how a household relates to energy, to its energy needs.
Thank you for your answer there, George. Yeah, I remember spending quite some time trying to unpack the energy poverty, income poverty, or more specifically poverty, I suppose, question. And it sort of reared its head recently in the UK with an article in our newspaper called The Guardian, sort of extolling the idea that we should stop calling it energy poverty, we should just have poverty. Which reminded me of something one of our politicians said in the UK in the 1980s. He said, you don't talk about food poverty, you don't talk about water poverty. And here we are in 2020 and 2021, talking about exactly those concepts. And so it's quite interesting to see the circularity of the debate on definition and measurement and what does and does not count and should not be considered. Going all the way back to Brenda Boardman's first, do we include housing costs or don't include housing costs in our measurements? So yeah, it'd be great if we could ever conclude the answer to this debate, but I imagine being academics, we probably won't. So as the drilling continues in the background, I think I will move on to the next question, which Catherine Mahoney asks for Anna. Clearly, there is a worrying lack of engagement with energy poverty from policymakers in Hungary. Do you think this impacts public awareness of the issue?
Thank you for the question. Very good and difficult one. Actually, in the last 10 years, public debate has been really heavily thematized by a topic that is related to energy poverty, but it's not energy poverty in itself. It is energy prices. And the government introduced a quite populist measure of energy price cut, and they also fixed energy prices, utility prices at that level, which was not affecting, by the way, the prices of solid fuel users. And this policy measure was helping the government to win elections again. And they were using this policy as a key communication element for years, and it was really covering billboards on the country and so on. So besides these measures that are either populist or symbolic and have effect on energy poor households, sometimes helping them, sometimes just increasing existing inequalities, energy poverty is not thematized in a very large public debate at all, neither in the parliament. Sometimes opposition is raising the question why the government is not launching energy efficient retrofit programs, why they are keep forgetting or leaving them out from European, like in the planning of the usage of European funds and so on. But overall, I can say that energy poverty, the debate on energy poverty has not reached a level so far that could be really like part of a national debate, or yeah. So basically that's all what I can say. Of course, I don't know, next to a coffee I could keep talking and talking about these difficulties related to policies that are quite not reaching but still being communicated as helping also low-income households. So I hope I could somehow answer your question.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Anna. I suppose it's, whilst the question was asked to Anna, I personally, I'm going to take chair's prerogative here and be interested to know if how understood is the issue in the various countries that are reflected here, either where you're studying or where you're from. Is energy poverty a topic of public debate across the globe? We work in that field, so I assume everyone talks about it, but I remember sitting in my office writing my thesis and people going, "We'll just put a jumper on." That was the answer. That was the UK's problem solved. If everyone just put a jumper on, energy poverty goes away. So how understood is the issue of energy poverty across the world? I will start maybe with Alejandra, and then we can move on from there.
Thanks, Rob. Well, in general, I will speak like a Chilean researcher. We tend to look a lot on the experience of European Union because there's much more research and policies implemented on energy poverty. But we also have a sort of knowledge gap of what's going on in Global South. Like research and publications are mainly in English, are mainly from the Global North. There's much less research in developing countries. There are less funds for significant research in developing countries. So in order to a bit answer your question, I think it's very important to share knowledge and experiences going out of the boundaries of the European Union. From our experience in Chile, a very, very good practice is this kind of networks, professional or research networks that are, I think, are very used, especially when they're collaborative. As you mentioned, Rob, I work and I participate since 2016 in a energy poverty research network that started in the university, but then we start building and trying to build a specific definition for Chile in the university, but then we start spreading the concept and the knowledge of energy poverty to policymakers, to the ministries, doing seminars, doing workshops, trying to move this beyond the academic boundaries too. That I think is something we normally fail as academics, like, as you say, we stay here, we study, we love what we do, but it's just kept there. So I think an effort we should do as researchers is to link global north and global south in research, because we have such a different culture and different architecture and different everything that is good to know from each other, and also to strengthen these research networks between all countries around the world.
Thank you very much, Alejandra. And yeah, as we're answering this question about sort of the understanding, I suppose the public understanding of the concept, is it something in the public discourse? This question also very much links with another question, so I'm going to bring that in as well as we continue to answer it from Graham Sheriff, who is one of the FPRN trustees, and he would like to know what are your thoughts on how we can best share knowledge and best practice on energy poverty between countries. Obviously, Alejandra has just highlighted the sort of the massive opportunity to share between the global north and the global south, and it's something that I would love to get involved with. And I'm sure many people already have these linkages and are looking to work in that area. But so how do we best account for similarities and differences across the world? Is it about keeping things like the FPRN going, linking in with the Energy Poverty Observatory? Sorry, I've got your organization's name wrong there, Alejandra, but the one that's running in Chile, RAL's network in Finland, or is there something more we can do? Because as you say, we need to get out of this bubble of researchers all talking to each other and actually causing change, having impact. The Fuel Poverty Research Network are really proud that we've now been cited as a source of knowledge by the UK government in British policy. But how can we sort of achieve that for other countries and other policies? So I'd love to hear the panel's thoughts on both of those elements. So I will go to George, and then we'll take it from there.
Yep, thank you. So I would slightly rephrase the question in the sense that, just to acknowledge the fact that we are already trying to do that, okay? So as it has already been written in the chat, simply the fact that we are in this panel and willing to participate in such events already makes a difference. But most of the people I know in the energy poverty community, to put it this way, are already trying to engage with policymakers in their home countries or in their localities and so on. So rather than asking how we can do that, as if we are not already doing that, I would rather focus on trying to learn lessons from each other from our everyday work and practice in trying to engage with policymakers, because for sure some things are similar and others are different. But besides that, I think one way to make such conversations even more meaningful and also have a good outcome when it comes to engaging with policymakers is to try to relate to some umbrella concepts. This is something that I'm finding useful in various conversations, because if we, for instance, if we say energy poverty and stop there, then as we move around Europe or the globe, we end up in this issue of various symptoms, existing or non-existing definitions, To what extent is the phenomenon the same if we go from the UK to Romania to Spain and wherever? But if we relate everything to, let's say, quality of life, okay, this already makes it a bit more meaningful and even a bit more easy to assimilate by policymakers. It's essentially, this is what it's about. Another concept is the one that we're talking about, vulnerability. The fact that being energy poor actually generates vulnerability, which affects not only the household's behavior or its state with respect to energy needs, but an overall vulnerability that affects the quality of life. So that's my feeling, my take on it, coming from again a more conceptual perspective, but moving towards specific empirical use of these debates. So try to raise the stakes by not necessarily changing the words that we use, but linking them to something that is at an even higher level, in a way that, and also part of common language to a greater extent than the concept that we are already using.
Thanks, George. And I think Caroline has something to add on this. So over to you, Caroline.
Yes, I was just going to say that this blessing of this conference going virtual has been amazing for this kind of being able to share our knowledge and best practices across the world. I mean, otherwise I would never be able to attend this conference. And also just from the plenary that we had earlier about the STEP project and all of this, I think that there are many ways that we can learn from how each country is addressing their policymakers and their advocacy groups and all of this, that we can learn and maybe adapt to our own country. So here in Australia, while I'm developing my research, I've been in contact with the Council on the Aging, the Public Interest Advocacy Center to help with this, to bring this public awareness as well, and try to tackle this in a more broader way outside our academic bubble, as you put it in. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So I'm going to quickly then move on to another question, which comes from Liz Warren. And she has asked, or stated, several panelists have mentioned energy poor households have been using solid fuel or are often associated with those who use solid fuel. So do we need to have new thinking around policy and practice to specifically support these types of householders? Just an initial thought on that. In the UK, when I've been going to households which have been offered free energy retrofit schemes backed by the government in the area of Yorkshire, which is where I'm based, which is so commonly historically associated with coal mining, anyone who used to work in mines is offered a free allowance of coal. So we went to them and said, oh, we can replace your back boiler, which was coal fired, with a new really efficient boiler that will improve the warmth of your home. And there was no interest at all, because then they'd have to pay for the energy, whereas they get given this free coal. So to overcome that sort of historical reliance and then free coal that they get as a result of having worked in the now defunct coal mines, we find it challenging to encourage a move to more energy efficient means of heating and warming homes. Warming is generally the problem in the UK. Yeah, does anyone else have any opinions on the need for specific solid fuel support? Again, I think Alejandra might be a good place to start, because she was talking about the particular reliance on wood in Chile. So over to you to start with this one.
Thanks, Rob. Well, we definitely need more specific policies, no doubt, depending on which country we are looking at. For example, in Chile, because all the rest of the fuels are so expensive, we cannot say, okay, we ban firewood, nobody else can use firewood. First, for example, in the south of the country, firewood is a very affordable source, and it's also in the informal market. So if there is any economic crisis and the prices of fuels increase, you have the wood there, you know, like outside. You can access to wood to heat your house. And when countries are like Chile, for example, that have low-income people that really struggle to financial minimal standards, it's not so easy to say, okay, we have all the cities polluted for particulate matter, let's ban the firewood. It's been a discussion for a long time in Chile. So I think definitely the policies have to be very specific and regarding the context in which we are working. Rob, that's my opinion.
Thanks very much, Alejandra. Yeah, it's very good to hear its relevance in Chile. I think I might ask Anna as well about Hungary, given some of the concerns that she raised in her presentation and the video online. So what do you think, Anna?
So solid fuel use is also an important topic in Central Eastern Europe. Talking about biomass and coal. Coal is more used in Poland and other countries, while biomass in Hungary and Romania as well. And it is really important that, for example, Hungary is using biomass statistics to contribute to renewable energy targets, while this biomass is largely burnt in inefficient and polluting stoves in household level, creating local air pollution. So there is a specific policy issue in this term as well. But in general, there is a need to provide support to upgrade heaters and to deliver energy efficient measures for households so they can reduce their energy needs and therefore reduce pollution as well. And also in a more strategical level, it is a question to be decided whether we redirect these households towards other fuel sources. In Hungary, mostly it's gas, which has to be outphased also at one stage. So it should be really considered as a strategy spanning the heating sector for the next decades.
Thank you very much, Anna. So two interesting perspectives from two parts of the world. I'm going to quickly read this next question. Hopefully you can hear me. It's getting really loud. I'm sorry. So Entabi, who was a panelist yesterday in the energy and gender debate, asks, to all panelists, as a follow-up question about engaging with policymakers, do you feel that if we had more quantitative data rather than qualitative on energy poverty, policymakers would be more convinced about the seriousness of the issue? Throughout my career, I find that policymakers respond better to numbers that represent the scale of the problem. What would be the most efficient ways to collect data? Whilst I have quite a lot of opinions on this particular question, it's not my panel, so I will hand over to the panel. Maybe Teresa, what do you think on this? And then we'll hear from some others as well.
Okay, well, for my own experience on qualitative data and research, even with my PhD thesis, I think qualitative approaches from social sciences are difficult to understand even for academia and researchers, but it's relevant and necessary to understand and explain new social phenomena when you are not prepared to release coded responses in a closed-ended survey, for instance, because qualitative research allows room to insights and unveil experiences, reflections. So we have to work on active citizen participation movements, participatory techniques, and communication to policymakers, and creating at least culture on qualitative valuable information. And this is why this is the reason why I support my investigations, my research in photos, for instance, because they have a high visual impact. It's called visual sociology. As part of the visual sociology, and this because I could say that with a photo you objectively reflect something that you otherwise you can't describe, but in a subject way. So it's like more high impact. Yes, when people see that.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. That was really interesting, and I like the idea of visual elements as well, telling a story quite quickly. You know, we certainly have a saying here in the UK. You know, a picture speaks 1,000 words, and if politicians want everything on one side of A4, maybe one picture will do it all. But I'd love to hear what George has to say on this topic as well. So over to you, George.
Yes, thanks. I was actually begging for the chance to answer that question because I have a chance to share a bit of frustration that I have coming from a project that we are currently implementing here in Cluj, where I live and work, where we are actually trying to put some numbers behind this approach that we've been talking about in this paper, in this presentation. And for over a year now, we realized how difficult it is. So I think we can all hint at the fact that it's difficult to get data from stakeholders on a variety of variables that we need in order to actually get a sense of the spread of energy poverty in a city like this one, and the various symptoms that develop across the city. But now we actually can testify to the fact that indeed it's very difficult to acquire data from the municipality, from energy providers, from households, because that's another issue. And in order to get a good sense of energy poverty and quantify it properly, we need all these to work together, and you know, we as researchers can step in and work with this data. So basically, it's like a puzzle out of which we only have pieces. So we got some of the data, but not all of it. On the other hand, we managed to conduct a survey, and we're right now still playing with the data that we got from that survey on a representative sample of households at the level of the city, which actually gave us a good insight on behavior inside the households. This is something that you don't always get out of data, especially when there's no smart metering like it happens here in Romania. But besides that, I do share what Teresa just said of the fact that we need to develop communication skills, not just visually, but I don't think it's that much about qualitative or quantitative data. So mentioning the words, I actually think policymakers get a little bit scared when you start coming up with these magical words that they don't or rarely understand. So I'd rather say it's best if we just avoid that altogether and just give them facts. I do agree with the fact that they respond better to large numbers because at the level of a municipality or of a national government, they want to know that if they enact a policy, that will cover as many people as possible. That's not necessarily bad. What we, however, have to pay attention to ourselves and then the policymakers themselves is that they don't come up, as it often happens, with a kind of one-size-fits-all type of policy that catches some people but overlooks many others simply because the policy does not identify properly the specific types of poverty, energy vulnerability, and so on. So we as researchers and people who want to have an input in policies need to learn how to communicate effectively in the end.
I think that's a great summary, George. I completely agree. That's the same sort of discussion I've been having with UK policymakers, where we perhaps have a bit more availability of data and quite good publicly available data sets. But when you start talking about quantitative versus qualitative data, it scares them off. And I've been really quite keen, sort of opposite to Natabi's point in a sense, to encourage more use of qualitative data. But the way I've been doing that is by bringing that in through the back door. So how can we sort of turn that into a format that they understand? It's not the perfect answer. And if I put it into an academic paper, I'm sure I'd get ripped apart. But in terms of making a change and an impact, I think that's the way we can do it. And we need to learn to talk the language of the policymaker if we want to have our insights help. And then we can slowly help change the language of the policymaker, and then we have a wonderful, perfect world. And I think that's been generally what we've been learning in this session, is that actually researchers have got a lot to offer. We might have to learn a bit more about how we present those offerings, but we can share our ideas and understanding from amongst and around the world to really improve our understanding. We need to be careful not to assume that answers from the global north are applicable to the global south, and there are lessons we can learn in both directions. And that's something that I certainly want to try and do a lot more of following this conference, is, you know, making those connections with people from the global south, and virtually, or, you know, going over, if you like, to that country via the wonderful world of Zoom to go and understand the situation and work with people to see what I can learn from different contexts, different cultures, different policy regimes. So it has been such a fantastic session. So I really enjoyed chairing the session. So with a few minutes left, I think I am going to close the session and thank every single one of our panelists for their contributions and their discussion and their debate. It really has been very empowering and exciting for me as a researcher, and I hope it has been for you too. I'd also like to thank all of our participants online around the world, in whichever time zone you're in, whether you're about to go to bed or you're still stroking that morning cup of coffee. It's been brilliant to have you all involved and to see you all. I'd like to say at this point, don't forget that Hoover isn't just the platform we are using to share the videos, but it is a chance to join in a vibrant community. I've been told by Liz, who is our event support and organizer and general all-around brilliant person, and Rachel, that actually this platform will be available for up to 6 months after the event. So all of the discussion and debates and posts that you put on Hoover are there for us all to share and engage with as we move forward. So after this session is finished, if you want to say something to someone individually, go and find their profile on their platform and you can send them a message. Many participants have linked into their Twitter accounts or LinkedIn accounts as well. So connect off on those platforms as well. But use the community feature on Hoover as well to keep the debate going, share your papers, share your ideas, grant opportunities to collaborate. We want to hear what you do as a result of attending this conference. That's one of the main aims, is not just to talk, but to drive action. So please keep yourself engaged. And I look forward to seeing you all later on today at the next session. So thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you at 2 p.m. for Energy and Transport Poverty in Europe. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.